Thank you so much, Dr. Agapuri. I'm really pleased and happy to come back to you in this valuable occasion, and I share this moment with my privileged colleagues, Dr. David Romano and Professor David Romano and Dr. Negat Parto and Dr. Sarhun Al. So actually, thank you so much for the organizer, the American University of Kurdistan Center for Peace and Humanity. So actually, I think Professor Romano has delivered a wonderful speech, and it was based on a kind of a very good empirical illustration. I'm not going to be that much empirical in my presentation in the first part, but I need to be more analytical and theoretical in order to maybe look for a possibility for the Kurds as a kind of emerging people or actors in the process of transformation. For me, regardless, for example, I'm completely agree that we are in a kind of time of uncertainty. We see the obscurity. We don't know what will be the next and the future prospects. I fully agree with Professor Romano when he talks about the lack of knowledge of Donald Trump, about the political sociology of the Kurds and the miscalculation. They're all true. But for me, I see and I observe a quite tangible, structural transformation which is going on, and which is we see, for example, is not achieved to its end. We don't see the final phase of this, but we see plenty of changes. And it may elevate the Kurds from a kind of intrastate actors, or maybe those who belong to domestic politics of four dominant states, transform them into regional and potentially global geopolitical actors, provided they Kurds themselves and Kurdish political parties and organizations take a kind of proactive role and position in this game, in this transformation. But most people may raise a question, okay, when you talk about the elevation or the increased improvement of Kurdish position, why we don't see yet tangible improvements amid ongoing conflicts and political transformation? Yes, it's true. In the short term, Kurdish actors and Kurdish politics in general face setbacks. And quite harshly, as we see across Syria right now, we don't see that much. We see some setbacks for Syrian Kurds. We see as well in Iraq that you see that kind of institutional fragmentation. As you mentioned in your introduction, that Kurds regularly under the attacks by missiles of drones coming from Iran and inside Iraq. And we see, of course, the kind of the truth that political parties of Rosh Halat have created a common platform, but still they don't show that much, activity, that much, sense of institutional arrangements or proactive, operation or action. But also there, for me, is a kind in. It is, however, we will see in long-term improvement in the Kurdish position. And for this, I want to evoke four major interconnected structural dynamics. The first dynamics is this October 7 that you mentioned in the beginning, actually is a cause of a huge big deal of destabilization of the Sykes-Picot order. We can see states inside this model that are quite nervous about their future, nervous about their territorial integrity under the threat, nervous about maybe they will lose their sovereignty, even nervous, maybe most importantly for the Kurds, and to some extent they are also scared or maybe kind of worried, they display worriness about maybe they will lose access to their very important strategic natural resources. So we will see this. And of course, specifically Iran, which had, according to me, kind of free navigation since the Islamic Revolution in the entire Middle East, and using its proxy networks and powerful alignment models in order to decide for many, many states. Now we see Iran, not only right now, but since the 7th October under constant pressure. And I can say any kind of weakening or eventual collapse of Iran would generate a major structural rupture. And a structural rupture with increased opportunities for the Kurds in order to increase their geopolitical relevance. This is one major cause. My second dynamic structure factor is the war right now, ongoing current war, which going on between Israel and USA on the one side and Iran on the other side, taking it from a definition of or the logic of a classical realism, this war is an existential war. What does it mean? It does mean that it has the kind of zero sum and tend toward decisive outcome. So we have two sides. We don't see, prospects for negotiation, for peace, for agreement, for just keeping the status quo. One side must be victorious and one side must be lose. Whether you lose it by means of military, arms and weapons or in the field, or whether you lose it by accepting some changes like in Venezuelan model, that Iranian, new regime or regime that will be emerge after the change will be pro-American. But those changes, I say, a person, a leader like Donald Trump, even, in taking into consideration his miscalculation, who seeks to make America great again, is unlikely to abandon without tangible strategic gains. So absolutely is important, even if it can be in two steps. First step can be maybe the control over the Strait of Hormuz, and later on maybe fundamental and deep changes inside the Iran and Iranian politics. Number three dynamic factor is the transformation of the Kurdish position in the global narrative. So actually, traditionally, Kurds, they are framed in general approaches in the media, in the political discourses, in the political debate, kind of mostly in normative terms, such as human rights or minority protection. Instead, this time, Kurds are increasingly viewed and perceived as strategic actors within regional and probably international power structure. It does mean that they can reflect both external recognition and importance of operational capacity. This is the new narrative. My fourth structural dynamic is the emergence of a subject position for the Kurds. What do I mean by that? I mean this structural dynamic is de facto emergence of the Kurds as a subject position in global and regional conflicts. It does mean that the Kurds are no longer merely auxiliary objects of interventions, but actors participating, even if not that much proactively, not equally, not symmetrically, but in strategic decision making. So Trump calls them, and on the one hand, we have the Turkish president, which called back again in order to maybe change the course of the political, evolution. So you see the Kurds suddenly play a kind of major role in the regional arrangements. So this is very important to actually accentuate as a kind of indication for a qualitative shift. And then I will conclude that part. So we will see in the future, in the coming days or weeks, a kind of reconfiguration of the Kurdish agency in the region. Okay, the current moment is a transnational phase marked by, as I said in the beginning, uncertainty and realignment, which can obscure deeper structural change. Over time, new political and regional configurations are likely to emerge, in which Kurdish actors will play a major institutional and decisive role. But this transformation does not signal marginalization for the Kurds, but much more reconfiguration from a maybe traditionally peripheral object to a more strategical subject, provided, but is conditioned, provided that major Kurdish political actors, they read the situation and they set up functioning calculation, and following this calculation takes decision, and in certain extents, and even take maybe some steps inside the country in order to mark position or take position and to show themselves to the international community that we are serious political actors. Thank you so much. Very quickly about geopolitical, what I call as process of transformation of the Middle East, and we are entering an era of post-Sykes-Picot time. And it does mean maybe some changes even in the political map and the internal structure of the nation states in the region. But one additional dimension of it, we should take into consideration the ongoing Ukrainian and Russian war. So Russia also plays a considerable role by supporting Iran and providing that state with maybe intelligence services or maybe drones, and even China. Part of, maybe I should be disagree with Professor Romano when he says actually Trump has no calculation, but he has a kind of rational calculation when he removed, for example, Maduro from Venezuela and attacking this Iran. And even that, energy crisis is also related to China. China had very easy and cheap access to Venezuelan oil and to Iranian oil. It's below prices, is maybe 30 or 45% cheaper than what we have in the ordinary, oil market. So actually, it does mean a huge, source of energy for China, which is a kind of economy which increase like that and high productivity. So China, right now, they experience, China's government experiences a huge setback in terms of, productivity. So actually, this is also a very important dimension to take into consideration when we analyze this about. So another side, the position of very important and very famous British insurance company called Lloyd's. Lloyd's is directly and openly connected to imperial family, and that Lloyd's is increasing in income, and prima of the insurances, following the course of the conflict, increasing and decreasing. Actually, in a way, I can dare say directly connected to Iranian state in order to maybe increase the prime and the prices of insurances for the, maritime navigation and for the shipment and like that. Now that company is almost out of the play. So this is very important to extend our analysis like this in order to grasp a kind of relevant picture of the ongoing conflict and probably more transformation that I expect. As for the Kurds, I want to connect what Dr. Al said about Öcalan and Apo. Actually, I have written recently, 3 months ago, it has been published, an article of me. So in this article, I addresses the emergence or the growing of independence discourse narrative among diaspora and Kurd, but which also extend to inside the Rojava, among Rojavati Kurds. So for me, actually, the position and the mainstream discourse is not just about what political organization they address the politics formally. What we have, for example, in the KDPI, Democrat, party program, what PAC says, but even plenty of members inside those party, they adopt a kind of independentist discourse, which is quite dominant. And this one also understands the way, for example, the process that Dr. Al mentioned in Turkey, for example, the initiative taken by Bahçeli and Öcalan, and it called it a kind of, Kurds call it as peace process, but while it called by Turks a no terror process. But most of Rojavati Kurds, they know quite clearly that that kind of approach and that kind of solution, it would not bring that much of, rights for the Kurds. Why? For example, it says, the idea that even now Pajak, which was forwarded and highlighted by Dr. Parto, this guy is also an extension of the PKK and Öcalan ideology. Actually, they say it's time for Kurds to abandon the idea of nationhood, the idea of statehood, the idea of creating, for example, institutional in order to exert legal and political power. Nothing. Not even a simple claim for the recognition of the Kurdish language by Öcalan forwarded. Not even the recognition of culture. So Öcalan in his writings and, regular messages that he sent out from his prison of Imrali, he actually transformed the Kurd and considered the Kurds as a kind of social phenomena who should be integrated in the Turkish civilization and the Turkish part and successively become integrated and assimilated. Two very important Kurdish scholars have written this book about the process of Turkification, claimed by Abdullah Öcalan. I haven't read any good, cohesive response to this piece of research, which is very powerful, theoretically speaking and methodologically speaking. So among the Rojavati Kurds, this idea is quite clear. They know, for example, what the Rojava Kurds, Syrian Kurds, have lost. They know, for example, getting a couple of positions, becoming the state servants, for example, the vice minister of tobacco or sugar, the vice minister of what, while you have lost, for example, 20,000 of your children in fighting ISIS or claiming rights, and actually in the dominant mainstream political discourse among Rojavati Kurds absolutely is excluded. I tell you sincerely, and it is not only part of my research, this is something that I experience daily in my connection to social media, not also among scholars who are quite capable and able to formulate this, but ordinary people, the way that claim basic rights in Iran is not similar to that one in Turkey. So I advise my Iranian friend to forget about that kind of solution. So becoming, integrating part of a kind, dominant, major democratic process, and at the end, even like in Spain, in democratic, and even for the native people of New Zealand, they are losing successively. So people know this. It's very important to address it, not just be delivering a kind of romantic discourse in order to attracting. Kurds says, okay, we will participate in kind of democratization. So Kurds in Iran, the dominant political discourse is conceived around the claim of sovereignty or shared sovereignty. It does mean that Kurds must have their own institutions in order to exert political power. So other issues, even the way that is formulated or addressed by political leaders is completely, not completely, but to a certain extent differs from what we see in society at large. So it's very important to address because it's deeply rooted in 100 years of struggle. Not even political leaders can compromise this. 100 years of political struggle. On the other hand, the political movement, also combined with social movement in Iran, they display a kind of high also diversity in terms of political discourse. It's quite highly gender equality oriented. So you don't see any people, for example, having sexist, statements in social media or maybe trying to degrading, female position. Absolutely is impossible. It's quite powerful. Democratic oriented. It does mean inside the Kurdish community society, there is a common acceptance for diversity, for different dialects, for different culture, for different subculture, for different, types of belonging and assertiveness. And then also Kurds showed, processually speaking, a quite good example of they are able to take care of their own governance. You mentioned Dr. Parto. Also, they displayed throughout the Xinjiang Azadi movement and uprising. So they are much more advanced in terms of political organization and societal organization and creating institution. So why should they decrease the position in order to be part of those insulting, for example, royal people? They don't have any real political speech to deliver apart those insulting, phrases or they use. Then one more issue is also very important. So comparing Kurdish society in Iran to the rest is much more, they show quite strong experiences and good example of the organization of civil society. Look at, for example, certain occasions or memories when, for example, the political parties call upon the Kurds to initiate a general strike. The entire people, they listening and they close down their shops and streets. And then, for example, when there is a kind of nature-related catastrophe, and the Kurds themselves, they initiate, they organize themselves from the north to the south in order to provide services to those people who are affected by that nature-related event. Or maybe you see the way that Kurds celebrate Nowruz is not just a kind of simple celebration that you see, a kind of, demonstration of type of civilization, a very strong way, and you see the mixture of both genders, civil organizations, preparation, symbolic parts of this is also involved. So actually we cannot expect that Rojhalati Kurds just by maybe some policy or decision in a conference in London or somewhere, or maybe one of them is more interested in less Kurdish politics or more Iranian democracy, just can, decide differently. It's not that easy because, as I told you, is deeply rooted in the history. is much more, diversified politically and culturally speaking, and very
Dr.
strong.
Khayati, I may intervene. I'm sorry.